I'd like to preface this video by extending my condolences to John Lord's family, to the members of Deep Purple, and all of their fans on his passing just a few days ago. May he rest in peace, and may Deep Purple's music continue to live on forever. Coverkiller Nation, it's time for us to get into another album review. This is an album review that some of you may like or may not. But that's just like any of the others. We're here to talk about Band of Brothers by the supergroup Hellyeah that includes members from Mudvayne, from Nothing Face, and of course features Vinnie Paul, formerly of Pantera, and Damage Plan, and of course the brother of the late Dimebag Darrell. This is their third record, and this is a band that's taken on some serious momentum whenever it comes to their fan base ever since their inception in 2006, and it makes sense why. This is coupling together a couple of the biggest commercial bands of the era, really, whenever they were coming together. Mudvayne, whether you like to admit it or not, was definitely a commercial success. Pantera was a huge metal success, being one of the first metal groups to ever have a #1 album on the Billboard charts. And Nothing Face, while they didn't exactly have that same commercial allure, also had a fairly underground fan base as well. So there you go. I mean, that's just crazy. But with their first two albums, there was a bit of a lighter edge to this. This is something that showcased a little bit more of a southern metal and outlaw metal, if you even want to call it, variety to it that even bordered on country at some locations. I mean, a song like Alcohol and Ass, I mean, you really don't expect to hear that every single night from a metal band. You actually expect to hear that maybe from a rock band obsessed with drinking, which they are, or maybe even from a country superstar or like Hank Williams III, something like that. Which, well, who knows? Maybe they worked with them. They did the Rebel Meets Rebel project, well, at least Vinny did. But here we are with Band of Brothers. Now, Band of Brothers, the very first thing that you're going to notice whenever you start to listen to this record is that it sounds oddly familiar. Now, I'm not saying that the songs sound exactly like other ones, because they don't. However, that tone, that heaviness, that particular tone, this album almost sounds like they really were trying to harken back the days of Pantera, almost as though this were a tribute album to the band. Now, of course, the problem with this is that they do not have a guitar player the caliber of Dimebag Darrell, and for all of us that don't want to admit it, they do not have a singer the caliber of Phil Anselmo. So, thusly, this is just a band sometimes doing their spin on Pantera. Now, whenever they're doing this, at first, it's kind of a nice novelty. It's something that works pretty well in small locations, and the reason for this is because it's a very familiar and a very, awesome throwback. But whenever you start to notice that it's not going to be as dense, it's not going to have as much of a complexity to it, it's really not going to have the same punch to it as a Pantera album did, then that's whenever the allure starts to wear off a little bit and it starts to rust over. And that's whenever the variety really needs to take hold a little bit. And there is some variety on here, but it only comes in little minor locations. In fact, whenever you get past track number 6, there are 2 songs that actually sound almost like mirror images of one another whenever you listen to the introduction. And that's whenever it becomes a little bit harder to continue onward. That's whenever everything begins to wane. Now, a lot of people that like bands such as Five Finger Death Punch and Disturbed, and of course the bands that the supergroup is kind of made from, the Mudvaynes and the Panteras and Nothing Faces of the world, will probably listen to this record and really like it. It'll be one of those awesome albums that they'll play whenever they're having one of their parties, and everyone will be like, wow, this is really, really fucking heavy, but I like it, I enjoy it. But whenever it comes to hardcore, die-hard metalheads, this is going to be something that, a few people will enjoy as a novelty, but a lot of people will just kind of cast aside and really not enjoy all of that much. They'll feel it to be kind of forced and a little hokey. And this is something that has entered the critical mainstream as well a little bit, with some people calling their lyrics repetitive, which they certainly can be. And it just seems as though they run out of ideas quickly, or they kind of get on a tangent or one particular idea and kind of just explore that idea as much as humanly possible, to the point where a couple of tracks tend to sound like they were from the same session. You can almost tell when the sessions were and what songs were worked on, because sometimes the lacking of variety can sort of spell out that position, but I'm not going to be here to judge that. What I am going to be here to judge is the fact that this album does present some headbanging moments, and it is not my job, nor should it be yours, to try to size it up to the previous band's works. That is a tongue twister. Instead, you have to size it up to their two previous albums, which is just Hellyeah and Stampede. And whenever you do that, what you actually get is truly their heaviest album. This is an album that certainly cranks up the volume and takes a more metal approach. You also have an album that seems to have a lot of personality to it, in the fact that the direct nature of the presentation really seems to speak a lot toward personal experiences, and a lot towards Vinny, who definitely felt a lot of anger after the tragic death of his brother. Also, you're going to see slight variations, and of course you're going to have your Alcohol and Acid style song where it almost resembles outlaw metal or outlaw country metal, whatever the heck you want to call it, real true southern music. You know, it's got a ballad approach to it, when in reality it's just, you know, delivered with a very, you know, relaxed acoustic guitar, almost as though somebody in metal pants, you know, with studs or a pair of cut-off jeans and a cowboy hat is on a horse heading out towards Wyoming or some fuck state over there, and this is what they're playing instead of playing All My Exes Live in Texas. Overall, the album is kind of a cool little treat, but it does wear on itself very quickly. The second half becomes very difficult to listen to because you start to notice the similarity between some of the tracks, and that does bring it down. I'd give it a 7. Man, that may even be kind of generous. Maybe 6.5 would be a little bit more fair. Mainly because this is an album that's kind of hard to get through the entire thing. I mean, if it was background noise at a party I was attending, I wouldn't mind it. In fact, I'd probably prefer it a lot more then. But if you're listening to it just by yourself, then, well, I hope you have beer, and if that's the combination, then your life is pretty lonely, and that kind of sucks for you. So yeah, there it is. You hate my opinion, then that's fine. If you love my opinion, then woohoo. Hell yeah. See what I did there?